Hi, welcome to TIFF. I just heard that you said that some people may say that it's a bad movie, but not the music, or maybe they just
No,
don't pay
that's
attention.
no, that's not exactly what I
No,
said.
but something like, but that's helped me to understand
No,
that.
what I said is that music plays an important role in film, I think, but it is a subconscious role. For instance, when I was in high school, this movie came out, Jaws, and John Williams wrote this brilliant two-note thing that the basses go da dum dum dum, and people would freak out as soon as they heard it. But my harmony teacher at the time, we were talking about it in class. He says, but the most interesting thing is that people feel it subconsciously because they don't even really notice that it's the music that's making them do that. And I said, I don't know if I agree with that. He says, just ask your friends. And every single friend that I asked about the movie, when I said, what was it that created the tension? They said, oh, I don't know. There was just a thing. And you could just tell that the shark was coming. So you learn that the music serves an important role, but it serves in the background. So what I was saying, the question was, are you excited and anxious about people receiving the music? I said, if the movie's great and the music's bad, people say great movie. If the movie is bad and the music is fantastic, they say bad movie.
That's true. So that's what I actually wanted. Thank you for clarifying that, but that's pretty much the answer I was expecting to hear. For the composer, it's always important to come up with a sound, with the music that will synchronize with the storyline.
Right, exactly.
To me, like I was just mentioning about earlier, that the moment you start watching The Hours, you hear the sound, the music, the score.
Right.
That score helps you to enter the story.
Right.
And that's where you start living it along with everything else. And with the subconscious music as well that plays in your mind, that's what you hear. For you, as a composer, what do you do first to prepare yourself to write the song that you will be able to enter to that, so we as well?
Well, I watch a lot of movies, and since I took a film class when I was 16 years old, and I watch a lot of movies, and I also pay attention to the music because I play music, whereas my normal friends tend not really to pay attention to the music so much. So I've been paying attention to music and film for a very long time and learned a lot about it in my film class. So I listen to a lot of music, and I listen to a variety of styles of music, and I try to decide which style works best for which scene based on what I'm seeing. And then George and I talk about it. And he says no, and I say yes, and he says no. So the answer is no, and so I have to come up with something else. It's an interesting process working with George.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because the process of the songwriting, because my mom is composer, so
Okay,
that's why.
so you know what's happening.
I
No
know.
wonder you see the understand.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. I want to talk to the composer, obviously, but it's a different process. It's like, for people do not understand that you sometimes have to relieve even the aspect of the scene that those actors don't have to be in there, because there are 15 actors in 15 different scenes where they have to reveal all the emotions, a different type of emotion.
Right.
But you need to be in there.
Yeah.
So what do you do to prepare yourself to relieve each moment so that you know that you have scored the right song?
Well, I listen to so much music, and I, particularly as I've gotten older, I tell all of my students, we learn all this data, but the data doesn't mean anything unless you can craft a sound that has an emotional effect on listeners, because that is what the audience responds to. So when I'm watching the film, regardless of all the various emotions that are in play, for each scene there is an overarching emotion for that scene. And that's what I focus on. What do I feel is the emotion? And if I'm not sure, I'll ask George. And George is able to, it's really brilliant what he does. He tells these little stories. He tells these little metaphors about what he feels the music should be. And when he tells them, I'm like, I completely understand what you're saying. I would have never thought of it that way. So then I rewrite it. So yeah, it's a very fun process. I enjoy it. It's very different than what I normally do.
I don't know how much time I have, but nobody told me that
pulled
to
you
stop.
away yet,
So was there any moment, not just in particular with this film, but throughout your career, when you found yourself stumbled, maybe paused for a second, like this is the scene I don't know how to go through? What do you do to navigate that process that you just know, I have no words, I have no sounds, it's silence in my head?
Yeah, it never happens to me. But what does happen is I'll watch a scene and I'll say, oh, this is great, and I'll write something. And then a year later, I'm like, yeah, I shouldn't have wrote it that way. Because the more music you continually learn, like, action scenes, for instance, I was always writing music that depicts action. And one time a music editor said, why don't you go in the opposite direction? Like, Write some really beautiful. Sometimes the most violent scenes in film, the music is very slow, and I'm like, really? And I couldn't hear it. And after we had that conversation, a year later, I'm like, so my brother Delphio, he was writing a scene of some people who were drowning in a flood.
Yeah.
And he had this music and it was all full of tension. I said, well, why don't you go the opposite direction? And he goes, what do you mean? So I sent him, he goes, man, how'd you figure that out? I said, the guy told me about that 20 years ago. And it took me a year to figure it out. So I usually have something to write. And then I realize after I write it, yeah, that's not really the right thing. But that's how growth is. You know, growth is about, you know, learning. I write with conviction at the time. And then as I evolve, I look back and say, yeah, I meant it then, but that wasn't the right thing to do. That's usually what happens to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your
My
time.
pleasure. It's
And
great chatting with you.
congratulations. Yeah, thank you.
Regards to your mom.
Thank you. Bye.